Hi trainees, in this session we will learn to open PWM and MPPT charge controllers and identify components wired to understand mechanism. At the end of this session, you will be able to know the general components of a charge controller, explain the components of PWM charge controller, explain the components of MPPT charge controller, and appraise the assembly of components inside a PWM and MPPT charge controllers.
Let's begin by restating about solar charge controller. The solar street lights use photovoltaic modules to convert sunlight into DC electric charge and use a solar charge controller to store DC in the batteries and automatically switch on street light in the evening after sunset. In short, a solar charge controller is used to charge the battery from power generated by solar panels and prevent the battery from overcharging. It is also known as a voltage or current controller as it directs the voltage and current from the solar panels to the battery and stops the reverse flow at night. Home systems use PV module for household applications in which charge controller plays important role. Shown here is the charge controller and its connections with other components in solar PV electrical system. Let's see the general components of a charge controller. It has two battery input terminals, two solar panel input terminals, and two load terminals. The load terminals are for running various DC loads like lights or our solar grid tie inverters. The external components of PWM charge controller are LCD screen, USB output, input terminals, injection port, plastic shell and iron backplate. Here is the PCB of PWM charge controller. The components are Arduino Nano, P MOSFET, power diode, buck converter, temperature sensor, current sensor, TVS diode, transistors, resistors, ceramic capacitors, LCD, RGB LED, bicolor LED, jumper wires or wires, header pins, heat sinks, fuse holder and fuses, push button, screw terminals, PCB standoffs, and USB socket. The components of MPPT charge controller are LT3652 driver, capacitors 2 pieces, green LED, orange LED, 220K resistor, 330K resistor, 200K resistor, 68 UH inductor, 1 UF capacitor, 100 UF capacitor 2 pieces, battery 7.4V, 1K resistors 2 pieces and barrel socket. Let's open the PWM controller. Required tools are PWM controller and screwdriver. To open the PWM controller, follow the steps shown here. Identify components wired to understand mechanism. Let's open the MPPT controller. Required tools are MPPT controller and screwdriver. To open the MPPT controller, follow the steps shown here. Identify components wired to understand mechanism. compare the PCB, components, circuit, etc. and write your observations.
We have reached the end of this session on to open PWM and MPPT charge controllers and identify components wired to understand mechanism. By now, you should be able to know the general components of a charge controller, explain the components of PWM charge controller, explain the components of MPPT charge controller, and appraise the assembly of components inside a PWM and MPPT charge controllers.